It's a great pleasure to be here. You may wonder, what is an art college doing talking to you? But we are the Royal College of Art. We're 80% about design. The Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design has been going for 25 years and exists solely for one purpose and one purpose alone. That is to use design to improve people's lives. And I think this is where conversations with Nick and the consortium started. It's a fantastic consortium to be a part of, and I'm not just saying that because Nick is in the room. We are a multi-skilled bunch of people. There's an insurance company there, there's an energy company, there's the technologists, and all of these people felt that we couldn't just inflict a new technology on people without actually understanding their needs, their wants, and their aspiration. So enter stage left, the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design and the Royal College of Art. This is myself and Professor Dale Harrow, who we're co-leading the project together. For many of us, this is the first driverless vehicle, the flying carpet. And I think there's something here that captures a zeitgeist, a kind of imagination of us when we think of driverless vehicles today. You know, I love Nick's slide of the older lady, who got used to the driverless vehicle and felt that she wanted it to go a bit faster. I kind of relate to that myself. But from flying carpets, to the consortium, we really asked a couple of research questions. And one was, what are people's perceptions and attitudes towards autonomous vehicles, and that will be important when designing for acceptance and adoption? So quite often, technology manufacturers, architects, designers, engineers, we create something, then throw it at the market. What happens if you start to look at this radical step change in mobility? And I love Lola's thought of it being an experience and a service rather than a vehicle. What happens when you get to that level of acceptance and adoption? What happens if you've got it wrong? So we are embedding this right in from the start. And the other thing is, how might the design of autonomous vehicles influence people's perceptions and attitudes to make acceptance and adoptions more likely? So we've done a sort of roadmap. I don't expect you to read this. It's just up there to prove that we did a lot of work. But it's really looking at the concerns and benefits of autonomous cars, and everything from death and accidents to costs to urban environment to infrastructure to hacking, insurance and law, policy and control. We've looked at a lot of things. But the main thing that we've done in this tranche of the project is talk to people. We've run nearly 12 different workshops with people across London. And we had a number of different participant groups, people with additional needs on the left, drivers, non-drivers, we had enthusiasts, and we've also had professional people as well, professional stakeholders. The interesting thing for us is our methodology isn't just to go for an average type of user. None of us would introduce ourselves, kind of say, hi, I'm Rama, I'm average. The average doesn't really exist. So we've been looking at sort of extremes, because I think that informs the edges and sort of fills in the middle. So, taking people with additional needs, we've talked to people who are much older, who may have lost a driving license. We've talked to younger people and kids. We've talked to visually impaired people and people with reduced level of hearing as well. And these people tell us something interesting about mobility. In the first activity, we really mapped hopes and fears. You can tell this is a workshop. It's got the prerequisite number of post-it notes on the wall, so you can tell we're really working. And we also got people to co-develop ideas. We didn't just want to use people as guinea pigs and say, let's study you. Let's kind of bounce you around in a vehicle and see what happens. We wanted people to have a platform for expression. And these are just some of the things that we got people drawing, imagining, and talking about what they would potentially do in a driverless vehicle. Because, we do more than just drive in a car or be driven. We eat, we talk, we flirt. Sometimes flirting can lead to something else. We do many, many different things in a vehicle. And sometimes the vehicle can be the only space where you are truly by yourself, that you can listen to music, even in your own house. The equivalent that a lot of people talked about the vehicle being, the equivalent room was the bathroom, where you can be truly alone. So there is something of that sense of privacy and ownership of space, that as you move into these kind of public and shared hybrid modalities that are quite interesting. And we also got people to map journeys. What are they doing? What would they be doing? What could they be doing? Could you be sleeping, for instance? If Hilton did a driverless vehicle, could you go to sleep in Glasgow and wake up in Paris, for instance? So starting to think about these things, we really got people's imaginations fired. And again, just sort of getting a sort of dream experience checklist. Important to get people to dream in this, not just to answer questions. Both are important. And then we also entered into vehicle design, and we got people to design vehicles. And right in the bottom center there, you can see the fantastic material that we used, Lego. Everyone understands Lego. Everyone plays with Lego, and people really enjoyed this. Giving people permission to be a kid again and dream and imagine was really important. This may seem like a childish activity, but actually what came out of it was very serious, because what people described using their Lego vehicles was a real set of needs and aspirations. And of course you got the kind of crazier ideas like a kebab shop or a park bench that floats around. But we actually turned those into ideas, because when you ask people, why should it be a kebab? Well, they would say, non-drivers, non-users should benefit from it. Lola talked about 80% of the city space. I think cars are parked up pretty much 90% of their time. What we took from that is people's aspiration that this should give back to the city.
If the design of the roads started to encroach on pavements and zebra crossings and control crossings, that's our way of understanding where we are. And if that is encroached on, then I would not be able to go out with my guide dog. She would not be able to work. And for me, that would be a lifeline lost. She is priceless to me, because she gives me freedom and confidence and independence.
So I put this up. This is a lady who has low vision, talking about if you remove some of the road infrastructure. And one of the beautiful things about driverless vehicles is you may not need the visual clutter that we have in the city. They could navigate either using a fixed track or using cameras, or just recognize what's in the environment. But for some people with low vision, that would mean a loss of quality of life. And I think this really talks to the fact that we are constantly negotiating different needs and aspirations in this space. Nick is a very brave man for stepping into this, because you're constantly having to juggle different tensions and different needs. This is the vehicle. Nick has introduced it, and I'm sure Graham will talk even more about it. But it's a great sort of platform for design, invention, and intervention. And we've gone out and done some tests in the last couple of weeks on the vehicle. It's called Henry, by the way. So Henry has had a few people rolling around, and you can see some of our researchers on the bottom left going through some very sort of imaginative, descriptive things on the vehicle. We've also commissioned bits of research in California, where driverless vehicles are sort of pootling around. I'm sure you've read about this in the news, Tesla, Google, etc. And the reason we're doing all of this is we're uncovering really surprising things. So one of the things is, in California, guess which group really likes driverless vehicles? Any guesses? Petrol heads, boy and girl racers. Why? Because if you're herring down a road and there's a human driver in front of you, you don't know what they're going to do. A driverless car will always behave and move out the way to let you go past. So, if you're, in California is that car culture. And that was a really sort of interesting thing. It's a little bit of a more frivolous one, but I just share it with you as one of the surprising things. These are just some of the, we put a GoPro camera in the roof to just kind of observe what people are doing, and sort of threw food, popcorn, various other different things at them. We are going to get a little bit crazier in what we do. So I wanted to end with some design work. We are designers. We do work with social anthropologists, psychologists, and we do have a multidisciplinary team of engineers, architects, etc. But what we produce is design. And what we wanted to create for this section of the project was some imaginative futures for around driverless vehicles. We created a set of design briefs which really deconstruct the vehicle. The problem with design and driverless vehicles is the word vehicle. So if I say to you vehicle and get you to draw something, it would look like a car. But, bottom right is my favorite, which is a banana on wheels. And this was just really meant to talk about what if it was food on wheels, to fire the imagination of people, fire the imagination of our designers. And they came up with many, many different things. These are not meant to be real. They're meant to be inspirational, provocative, and informative. And a lot of these have been designed from the real insights and the real research. So I'll just take you through some of them. So some of these things are looking at the size of the vehicle. If you don't need particularly to have a driver space or a boot, it could be a box, which is very space efficient, especially in countries like Japan or Hong Kong. It could be tall, so you could walk into it, which is ease of access for people of all ages, all abilities. That is incredibly inclusive if you can walk into a vehicle. A bus is great for that, but a bus is not great for other things. What if it could have sleeping cubicles? What if you could actually use these driverless vehicles to move around the airport, to change the architecture of a building? So if a flight is delayed, could you bring in a raft of driverless vehicles to actually sleep people instead of carting them off to an off-site hotel? So it starts to get you thinking about different service strategies. This was looking at how do driverless vehicles show intention. So there's lots of adverts on the radios at the moment about, cyclists make eye contact. Drivers make eye contact with the cyclist. And we do that naturally. If you're cycling around London and you see that a car has stopped or is indicating, and you see the driver and they say go ahead, you go ahead. How do you do that with a driverless vehicle without it being annoying, without it being full of noise pollution or light pollution? So we were looking at very subtle ways of making that happen, how it could show intention. This was actually, if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, it could sense, and actually we were looking at how the front of the vehicle might move independently of the structure of the vehicle to signal intention, like a little, like the nose of a dog, sort of sniffing. We were looking at how you could redefine a sports car. So a sports car, instead of it being a sporty car, could it be a car you do sports in? And could you swim your way to work? And could you, swimming, actually power the vehicle in some way? Or cycling, so could you share with your neighbors? This was looking at much more solid, bigger vehicles. So picking up in your idea of the polycentric city, could you have bigger vehicles that move between those nodes and smaller vehicles that break off and go into the city street? The big challenge is, the last sort of kilometre of any journey. And that remains a challenge across the world. So could you have vehicles that break up and do different things? Could you have the toilet that comes to you? Or so like you could dial an Uber. Could you, if you need a toilet, could this come to you? But could it also deliver other services? Could it be a bookstore? Could it be an Amazon outlet? Could it be anything? So you start to look at how might other service providers become involved with the architecture of the city. This was just another definition of the sports car. You know, I love the impracticality of this, but it's just a beautiful image. Could you surf your way to work? Or could it actually be, you know, something that brings joy, mischief, and witticism into the city? You know, it's quite often when we're designing things, we get very serious, and we forget about things like play, like mischief, like wit. And I think with this project, it's something we want to explore. This is a slower moving vehicle that moves around the city. It's a cafe. So you could start in Oxford Circus and, you know, 2 hours later end up in Belsize Park. And what you've been doing is drinking coffee and working like you would in Starbucks, but you could actually be slowly moving. So we're also looking at speed. Could it be ultra slow? Could it be ultra fast? And then this was just some more sort of playful exploration vehicles. This was looking at different cultures. You know, why does it have to be the size of a car? Why can't this thing be the size of a bicycle or a mobility scooter? And, you know, so this was one thing that we looked at, which we were playing on the idea of dogs. So one idea was, could it walk your dog for you? Could you book a driverless vehicle to come and walk your dog? You know, you could even put your, what do you call those things, a Fitbit on it, and you can get your daily count if you wanted to. Or could it be a noodle bar that comes to you? Again, so thinking of the size of the vehicle, it could be this big, it could be the size of this room. You know, there's a lot of freedom there. And this was, again, looking at how it, you know, parking space being an issue, could this actually go vertically? And, you know, a lot of this is imagined in sci-fi movies. So at the, I'm nearly finished, at the London Transport Museum, we had an exhibition called Driverless Futures, Utopia or Dystopia, because we wanted to address people's hopes and their fears. You know, hopes such as the visually impaired person who keeps on tweeting me saying, I cannot wait to be a driver. You know, the parents who said to us, we would love for the driverless car to pick our kids up from school, but for the car to deliberately get lost, so it babysits them for a little longer. Right the way through to the dystopian version where, you know, things like the transport industry or the taxi industry, are jobs lost, or are they changed? Do they mutate? Do they evolve? So that kind of human challenges. So I just want to leave you with this picture, which was the very final design we had for the driverless loo, speeding down the road towards you. But it could also be a single-person vehicle that breaks off from that big bus and delivers you right to your door. And thinking of, if you think in geographic Europe, when you say someone with disabilities, everyone thinks wheelchair user, because that's the symbol. That's a really small amount. The biggest number is people who cannot walk without aid for long distances. And that could be most of us. You know, that was me in Tokyo trying to carry 2 30-kilogram suitcases through the underground. I've never had a workout like that. I swear, I didn't want to do that again. So this is a really kind of versatile, just little pod that we imagined, and I think just lots and lots of ideas come out of that. So watch this space. Thank you very much. Over to Graham.